Hello and welcome to the 39th episode of the Special Needs Voice podcast. My name is Aaron. Our goal with this podcast is simple: to share the stories and perspectives from the top leaders in our special needs community. By the conclusion of each episode, we hope you have laughed at least once, learned something new, and are better equipped to handle your next challenge. Today, Mike Walther, founding partner and president of Wealth Advisors, is joined by Dr. Christine Hargrove. Dr. Hargrove is a clinical assistant professor and the assistant director of the Love and Money Center at the University of Georgia, focusing her work on the intersection of money, relationships, and neurodiversity. As a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified financial therapist, Dr. Hargrove brings a unique perspective to her field, helping individuals and families better understand the behavioral and emotional side of money. In this episode, she discusses the difference between traditional and financial therapy, the common challenges neurodivergent individuals face with money, and practical strategies to support better financial outcomes.
Today we're excited to welcome Dr. Christine Hargrove from the University of Georgia, who wears multiple hats. And Christine, thank you for joining us today. We look forward to having you share your story and all the great work that you and the Love and Money Center are doing down at Georgia.
Well, thank you for having me.
Maybe we should start with exactly what it is that you do. We've had Aaron explain your multiple titles to our listeners, but what does that really mean? What does Christine do on a day-to-day basis to make the world a better place?
Oh, I love my job. I really enjoy what I do. And part of what I love is that I have a lot of variety in my daily life. And a really important component of what I do is I train future professionals. So I am a AAMFT approved supervisor. So what that means is I help train future therapists. I also help train future financial planners. So here at the Love and Money Center, we have undergrad, graduate, and PhD level students in both financial planning and couple and family therapy coming through, doing their applied work, working directly with clients. And it's all under a supervision umbrella, a lot of really intense supervision, videoed work, and I support that. So I support some of the communication techniques, risk, crisis, and then we in the class that I'm, for example, the class that I'm going to be teaching this fall, we're really delving into the overlaps between financial health, relationships, and mental health. And that includes mental conditions such as ADHD, neurodiversity, other forms of ongoing kind of chronic disability that affect how you deal with your money.
That's an incredible narrow niche to focus on. I would say that as a firm that focuses on helping families and loved ones with disabilities, we're typically focused on the caregivers and providing them with the knowledge to support their loved one. But what you're doing down there at Georgia is really focusing on how do the neurodivergent think differently, process differently, and how does that impact their financial futures and their financial comfort in managing their lives. What led you to that research and focus of those unique financial challenges of neurodiverse individuals?
Well, I came here to UGA to work on a doctorate knowing that I wanted to specialize in the overlap between ADHD and other forms of neurodiversity and mental health and relational health. So, how does ADHD affect individual functioning, and how does it affect family relationships? So that includes caregivers. I actually do a lot of work with couples as well, and I work a lot with parents who may or may not have ADHD or forms of neurodiversity themselves, raising kids who have some additional needs. There's a lot of stress there. So I knew that I already wanted to do that. And then coming to UGA is one of the hotbeds of financial therapy, and it is absolutely one of the standout places for it. And I was asked right off the bat, like, hey, we have a wait list for financial therapy, and we graduated all of our practitioners. Would you be willing to learn financial therapy? You'll get additional supervision. You'll get an additional set of skills. I was game for it. I thought that actually sounds really interesting. I like variety, and I was a bit of a second career. So I had, done a lot of money stuff in my own family, my own relationship. And so I was interested and took it on as a project, took on some financial therapy cases, and realized nearly immediately how applicable the money stress and the feelings about money, the relationships with money, and the money behavior was to my neurodiverse populations. And so that's what led me down this a bit of a rabbit hole, but tell you, it's like a rabbit hole that leads to a huge world, because neurodiversity is so much more common than we think. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously, money is common. Everybody has money in common. And, relationships, those kind of caregiver or couple relationships are also common experiences. So I've I got really narrow in my research and in my clinical focus, but it's also something that applies in some way, shape, or form to the majority of families out there.
Interesting. So, with a background in therapy, how would you say that financial therapy differs or maybe is similar to traditional therapy for advising of families?
So, in traditional therapy, you are focusing usually on some kind of diagnosis or ongoing family pattern. And a lot of it, behavior change matters, but a lot of it has to do with reframes, shifting behavior, making sure that the family relationships work for everyone. With financial therapy, it's really how you think, feel, communicate, relate, and behave with money. So it's all got a money component. And one of the things that I think is unique is that you can only reframe, like cognitive reframe, a budget that doesn't balance for so long before like the reframing doesn't work. Communicating about money is not going to cut it when you have these like larger structural or maybe systematic issues that are coming up again and again in your finances. And when I apply that to working with neurodiverse individuals, it's both the individual kind of experience of money and perception of money, ability to clearly understand what's relevant financial information, how to apply that information to my own life. And there's also some like objectively different systemic issues when you have ADHD or other forms of neurodiversity, like higher healthcare costs, overall lower educational attainment, overall lower income, higher likelihood of relying on the government or families for assistance. Like those are things that are not just about your own behavior. Those are things that are kind of these broader things. And if you don't know about that, if you're not thinking about the money side, you really are missing a huge part of the emotional and psychological experience of the families.
Interesting. So, in addition to the financial challenges individuals may have in terms of attaining a certain level of wealth or
Mhm.
finding those resources because of their disability, are there differences that you're finding in the processing of information for those with ADHD?
Oh, yes. Yes. There are quite a few. So one is, and I'll kind of throw out some research, and I'm weaving
It's
in my own like extensive experience in working with these populations. So we know that there is difficulty really understanding what's relevant financial information because
okay.
it's kind of this cacophony of information. When you're looking at some kind of finance, something or other, like what's APR, what's this, what's that, is that relevant to me? Is that just noise? So filtering the noise in financial decision making is really difficult. Applying it to your own life is more difficult when you have ADHD. So when I'm talking about ADHD and other forms of neurodiversity, I want to kind of pause for a second. A lot of times what these have in common as they relate to money are executive function
Okay.
challenges. So what that means, there are 7 executive functions in Russell Barkley's model that I like to focus on. So self-awareness, inhibition, nonverbal working memory, which is like the pictures in your mind, smells, hearing songs, that kind of thing, verbal working memory, emotion regulation, motivation, and then last one is planning and problem solving. They develop in that order, and I like to address them in that order. So when I'm talking about ADHD, a lot of these kind of map also onto autism and other forms of neurodiversity. So the difficulty deciphering the noise, filtering out relevant information is compounded in trying to apply that to your own life, in particular because most people with ADHD are sort of like short-sighted when it comes to time. So we talk about time myopia, like the farther away something is, the fuzzier it is. And you add that to this difficulty of kind of sensing the difference of time, sensing what's important versus what's urgent. So if you're really, really nearsighted and everything any bit away is like totally fuzzy, there's not really a point to trying to focus on it because you can't really see it. It's not clear. So you end up focusing on what's right in front of you. So that it makes it harder to plan for the future.
Hmm.
It makes it harder to save for the future. It also makes it harder to like see, to kind of keep in mind and in your mind's eye see when bills are coming due. So you see a ton of late or missed payments, usually relatively low amounts, because you just missed it. You didn't see it coming. You forgot that you had that coming due. You didn't do the mental math right because it was kind of 2 weeks away. It's kind of fuzzy.
That makes sense. So I'm guessing that a lot of those basic premises you mentioned that are relevant in evaluating someone who's got ADHD processing issues around finances are also apply to all of us. We all
Oh,
going to
yes.
process those same ways. It's just those with a diagnosis might have more challenges. Have there been any specific strategies that you and the center have been implementing with those you're serving that can help them be more effective in meeting their financial goals and being more successful around their personal finances?
Yes. So there are quite a few. And I always say, your mileage may vary with any given client because, everyone's a little different. I
Sure.
think that using visual aids as much as possible is one of the best things that you can do for working with ADHD clients.
Interesting.
So let me give you some examples of that. When you're talking about financial goals, what you'll hear, I actually think you hear this from most clients. You'll hear like a social desirability bias when people give you those answers of like, oh yeah, I want to retire with a beach house, or they throw out something that they think you're gonna approve of. They
Okay.
haven't really thought about themselves in retirement. Many people are like that. And so, and it can be really hard to think through what are my actual values versus what values do I feel like I'm supposed to tell you I have about retirement. Like, oh, I want to leave a lot to the grandkids. And maybe they kind of care about that, but also kind of want to do some travel, but they haven't really thought about it. So presenting things like lots of pictures, right? Like get yourself a slide deck of vacations, of time with kids, like get yourself a whole slide deck and do like when you go to the eye doctor, it's like one or two, two or three, one or three. Like just start winnowing it down because when you see it, you don't have to work as hard. Your mind's eye, that working memory, doesn't have to work as hard to picture it because you're just looking at it. So it's easier to have those like, oh, I actually like this. That one I don't care about. Like I don't want to try to do a biking thing. I don't care about that, but I do want to go to the beach. So using visuals, especially, I'd like to expand that to graphs. Waterfall charts are really, really great for helping people to understand the income and expenses. I love those. Color coding when you are working with clients who have executive function challenges. I think being proactive about owning the working memory part of the discussion by writing things down, and you may have a really cool whiteboard in your office. Everybody's a little different of how they like to set stuff up. You may want to use post-it notes and put it out on your desk, but don't make them try to remember the numbers, remember the topics. Like just write it down, stick it up, write it down, stick it up. And so you can move stuff around. And in some cases, you may have a client who's like, I kind of need to think about this. Could I have the marker, or could I have the mouse and move stuff around? And like you want them to be engaged. So make this a place that's really inviting, a relationship where they can be engaged, not just wait for you to tell them what their priorities are. This is a very minor tip, but it is such an easy thing to implement and it makes a big difference. So getting back to that time blindness, which is both how long are things going to take and what day is it right now? Like time feels like an accordion when you have
Sure.
ADHD. So it's very slippery. It kind of expands and contracts. And so it's disorienting. So when you are sending reminder emails, it needs to include the name of like the day of the week, the date, and how far that is from now.
Hmm.
So like your next appointment is in 2 days on Friday, April whatever, because you may say your next appointment is on April whatever, and they're like, got it. Or you may say your appointment is on Friday, and they're like, got it. Have they connected that April whatever is actually the Friday? Probably not. And how far away is that from today? They may be like, I'm pretty sure it's still February. Nope, it's April, right? Like, don't just go ahead and put all of those autofill features in that auto email. Just put it there. When you think about things, make it as easy as possible to respond. I see and hear a lot of nervousness about interacting with financial information. So there's, so there's the version of financial anxiety, which is really important, which is kind of like feeling anxious about your financial future overall. There's also a definition of financial anxiety, which is like anxiety that comes up when you think about money, not about your financial future, but like if somebody's like, how much is the tip? How much tip should we leave? And some people are like, this is a pop quiz. I don't know. I don't know. Like their mind goes blank. They just get really, really nervous. So when you can set a really engaging and comfortable pace and say things like, what questions do you have? Not, do you have any questions? Like assume they're going to have
Mm-hmm.
questions, check in really regularly. And when you check in, don't say like, are you following? Say like, okay, I want to pause. I want to review what we've covered so far and see where you're at, what questions you have as we've gone along. So really do a lot of like, we call that reflection and consolidation in
Mm-hmm.
therapy. I know, it's in a lot of different fields, but do that really regularly. And if you can space out some of your appointments, sometimes you need to have like a shorter appointment and just more frequent. Some people are not comfortable. They're not willing to have a half an hour check-in. Other people are like, that's cool. And I think I've worked with a number of different financial planners on some kind of pinch hitting. And so this is where it's up to you about if you want to implement this or not. But there's a ton of anxiety about the forms and the like legal official sounding language. And it really cues this often avoidance.
Hmm.
And so it's one of these like if you know, you know. And so if you talk to somebody with ADHD and you're like, hey, you ever like freak out that you're going to jail if you forget a checkbox on the taxes? And everybody's like, oh, I do, like I'm so scared of this. Like I hate it, I hate it, I hate it. And neurotypical people will be like, no, why would I be scared of that? Like they're just, like that if you know, you know. And so if you can help your clients plan for that of when you start to feel nervous, if you're feeling stuck on some of the financial homework, because in financial planning process, you're asking them some questions. You're like, I need you to bring me back this information. When you feel stuck, when you're not sure, or when you're feeling overwhelmed, what are the resources? Who can you call? Do you have a friend? Maybe could you call me? Could you call, like, do you have maybe an inbox for email for there are no stupid questions kind of inbox where it's just to help folks get unstuck so that they can keep making progress. And when you normalize that people will feel overwhelmed or they'll feel a little confused or a little embarrassed, and just say, like, when you feel this way, let's already have a plan for that so that we can keep going. People are a whole lot more likely to actually keep going instead of just ghosting you.
That was a lot of great advice packed in that answer. I mean, the things I heard, and hopefully I'm getting this right and I reflect back to you. One, layer your responses back to the person you're working with, whether it's dates and times or other things. Maybe give it to in different ways so they can process it completely and they may not get all of it the first time. Second, I heard you say that it's important to have them reflect and be engaged in the process and make sure that they're hearing what you're saying and not just assuming that, which I personally, 30 years into my career, probably can still do a much better job at doing. So it's great to hear that from you as an expert. And then providing them with a safe resource to know that, look, we might be in a different place with our level of knowledge about financial matters. And it's okay for you to be nervous or anxious about certain elements of that, but it's okay to reach out to our team. We're here to serve you and take care of you. And there are no stupid questions. There are no things to feel weird about feeling. Feelings are real and they're personal. And if you're willing to share this with us, we can help you get to your goals more efficiently.
Yes, absolutely. Setting the goals may be an iterative process. I think, and I know the financial planning process is supposed to be an iterative process, but often it can feel like a one and done. So we have now set our goals, and unless something changes, our goals are our goals. And what I see is that as someone becomes more comfortable talking with you and they start to understand the numbers a little better, they start to feel a little more fluent talking about it and thinking about it, there may be some other goals that kind of bubble up of like, well, if we have a little bit of wiggle room, I kind of would like this. And like, call that out and be like, I'm so glad that you thought of that. Right. Not like, oh, great. Now I have to go redo everything. So, expect that like iterative process is part of the progress that they are becoming really engaged and they're feeling like they can reflect that to you and it's not an inconvenience.
Interesting. So do you find then that the clients you work with, those families tend to have more changes and updates they want to add to their planning as they keep learning new things than maybe a family that doesn't have those challenges? Because I think in my case, some of our clients are less interested in revisiting something they did recently, but it sounds like in a situation with ADHD or other neurodiverse challenges that the repetition is very helpful. Maybe revisiting it either just to reconfirm it or to see if there's new things that have popped up can be beneficial.
Yes, I definitely think revisiting it can be beneficial. And I think so there is a very common experience and it's written about quite a bit of, especially with ADHD, there is a lot of self-mistrust. And I
Hmm.
think personally, I think that's especially with money, partially because what do I do? But also I have quite a lot of experience doing like straight up therapy for ADHD and also financial therapy for ADHD. And I think the self mistrust is really pronounced
Hmm.
in the realm of finances. And as someone becomes less and less mistrustful, and maybe they don't trust themselves, but they start to trust you. And then eventually they start to trust themselves a little more, it opens up like a more creative and more hopeful side of their brain. And that's where some of the new ideas start to come from of like, if I don't always have to be worried that everything's going to be terrible,
Mm-hmm.
I have a little bit more space to think about, well, how could I fine tune this? Or maybe I heard about an opportunity I'd really like to give a special gift to this foundation at some point, but I don't know what would that do to taxes and would that mess everything up? And instead of thinking, I don't want to make any changes because I'm so afraid I'll break everything, they think, my planner's pretty smart and he's going to give me good advice and maybe this isn't a terrible idea. Maybe this is actually something I want. So that self trust grows. And that's where you see that creativity and also that emotional connection to the reason you're doing the financial planning process in the first place.
Interesting. In the work with the individuals you're working with,
Mhm.
obviously they've got similar goals to anyone else, but are there any areas where someone with ADHD or other neurodiverse diagnosis might have a black hole that a planner might not know? Hey, you know what? With this kind of a population, I need to be extra thoughtful around this topic. Or maybe they're not going to think about that, but I'm assuming they are. I should check in with them and see about how they're doing with whatever that might be. Are there any areas like that we should be, as professionals doing financial planning, specifically aware of in serving families with ADHD?
Absolutely. I think the biggest black hole is the information discovery process.
Okay.
Like that step, if I mean it is like a deer in headlights of like, so what expenses do you have? What are your bills? What's your income? And it is, oh my gosh, it feels like you show up for the final exam and you haven't attended class all semester because you didn't know you were enrolled. Like it is that level
Wow.
of panic
Okay.
so often. And so then if and when the next step is, okay, go find all your bills and bring them back, that's like, okay, just take the exam tomorrow. Like, like where do I start? What do I do? I don't even know what bills I have. I kind of know, but I kind of don't know. So first, normalizing that if you have ADHD, often you're probably really disorganized with your money. You might be somewhat organized. You might have a partner who's done a lot of it, but if
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be engaged, you're not fluent in it, and you might not know how do you become fluent. So I will kind of have a checklist of like, okay, if you don't know what debts you have, which that is not uncommon with ADHD, of being like, I think I know what debts, but I am also afraid of myself. And maybe I have debts that I have forgotten about. Pull
Mm-hmm.
your credit report. And here's how I will go through it with you. So don't even look at it. Just pull your credit report, set up some kind of app that will connect to everything, that will start to log, and just use as many tools as you can so you don't have to do it manually, because every time you have to do something manually, you're really kind of depleting the cognitive ability to actually think about things. And then addressing the emotional angle of that process. I think a great way to do that I will usually insist my clients, if I know that they have ADHD or autism or something where I think that they're going to be struggling with this, I insist that the information discovery has to be separate from the information organization, which has to be separate from the problem solving. So the first step is just connect the accounts, pull your credit report, just pull the information together, but you are not allowed to try to start beating yourself up and saying, I'm going to live on beans and rice or whatever it is, because there's that emotional tension of
Hmm.
the like shame. There's a lot of shame. I mean, it just feels terrible. And so you immediately jump to problem solving and you don't actually go get all of the information. You're not comprehensive. So the first one is just information and you're not allowed to try to organize it or analyze it. The next step is let's just organize so that we don't have an aspirational budget. We have just a straight up realistic, this is what we've got. And then after you've got it organized, now we're going to look and say, okay, well, how does this fit? How doesn't this fit? Does it fit with goals, et cetera? And then you can start into the planning and problem solving. But usually what you'll see is somebody will try to go find some bills. They panic about that medical bill. Next thing you know, they've got this like pie in the sky budget and they're going to have these goals. And none of it is tethered in reality. And you actually don't have the information you need to do
Right.
your job because it short circuited it. So forcing that these are different phases, and especially if you have enough capacity as a planner to spend a little time coaching of like, I'm familiar with this app or that app. I will help you set it up. And I don't want you to look at it. I'll just help you set it up. And then later we'll go through, or I'll have somebody at my firm make sure the categories are correct. And then only then will we look at the reports and think through, does this align with your values or not?
That's amazing. I think in everything you've shared today, it keeps coming back to me that the best universal design starts with what does someone with a disability or some different ability
Mm-hmm.
need to be able to utilize this good or service when they purchase it. And so if it's designed for everyone, it's probably going to be designed the best for everyone. I think the same thing can be said about financial planning. If someone takes and internalizes all the things you shared about how best to serve the autistic ADHD communities and apply that to all of their clients, regardless of a diagnosis or not, you're going to be a better financial planner because all those steps you've shared, all those things you're doing in discovery, all those things in the process, if you do it that way to serve someone with a diagnosis, you're probably also doing it better with the clients who don't. So I love that messaging that everything you've shared really applies to all financial planners with all clients.
100%. This is a rising tide floats all ships on this one. And you're not going to hurt anything by being clearer, by being kinder, by thinking about what is this experience going to feel like for them as your primary mental state. Because when you are the expert, you have to be able to think in both languages. You have to be able to think from all perspectives. And when someone is your client, the reason that they are hiring you is because they don't have the abilities that you do. They only know what their experience is, but they haven't even like sat there and figured out the patterns, figured out the common pitfalls. You have enough experience to know you worked with a lot of clients. Like, here are some common pitfalls and here's how we can avoid them. So that's why, you bring what you bring and you can collaborate with the client and really have that good relationship. And the more that you bring in neurodiverse friendly approaches to financial planning, you're going to see all of your clients benefit from them.
That's a great message. For the fact of the matter is that not all of us can go to the Love and Money Center for professional training, as much as people are going to want to after hearing this podcast. But are there any final pieces of advice you can give all the listeners about how to help individuals thrive who have neurodiversity or some other type of disability when we're working with them?
So something that there's actually research on this and we hear it a lot is that among neurodiverse communities, there is this real perception that while there are financial professionals out there aren't really any who can help me.
Okay.
And most neurodiverse people would say that they themselves are the problem that kind of can't be fixed, right? Like, the
Mhm.
problem is me. I know that there are professionals out there, but they can't help me because I'm a problem. And I think that being really direct about your interest in stuff, being non-stigmatizing, not dancing around things. If you have someone in your own family or, circle of friends where this is just part of the water that you swim in, talk about it, make this an okay thing to acknowledge. I love the line, a person is a person, a problem is a problem, a person is never a problem. And you will probably hear from ADHD clients language, they'll talk about themselves as though they're a problem. A person has a problem, a person faces problems, and you are someone who helps people overcome problems and really be intentional about instilling hope for presenting yourself as someone who is on their side, and you want to help them also be on their side.
That's an amazing final message, Christine. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope people will check out the Love and Money Center at Georgia. If they've got young people aspiring to be financial planners, I can't think of a better place to get training. Thank you so much for your time today with us.
Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful.
Thank you for listening. Please refer to the show notes on how to connect with Dr. Hargrove. If you would like to suggest a guest for a future podcast, please email me at aaron@oakwealth.com. See you next time.